Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 88 of the Dynasty Junkies podcast, a proud member of the Dynasty Addicts Podcast Network, the DAP Network, if you will, and we do consistently because we love it. Man, what a wild week, and I am excited to talk about it. We got with me on the co-host chair this week, we got Scott Sidlow. How you doing today, Scott?
I mean, I love the free agency stuff. I don't love like the hot takes that come from it or the insane overreaction. But I mean, hey, if I can get some value on my teams, then I'm all for it.
Oh, exactly. And that's what we're here to help with, right? We're here to talk about those insane value swings. We're here to talk about those overreactions, see if we can help some of our listeners exploit the market that is now kind of in chaos in some places. And who better to help us with that than the guest we have on this week, Jordan McNamara. Jordan, how you doing tonight, sir? Welcome to the show.
Well, I hope I can be a help. Let's see. I don't know. I'm so disoriented from what's happened the past like 6 hours that I don't really, we're just gonna see what happens.
I like that answer. We're going to see what we can do to help, right? Because at this point, it's chaos reigns, right? At this point, we're just kind of dealing with it in the now. We're living in the moment. A lot of news broke even today before we started recording. We'll get into that in a minute. But before we do that, I want to make sure that we give Jordan a little bit of time to talk about what you do in the industry, what it is that you kind of bring to the game, mainly so that we can use that to piggyback into these discussions with free agency and everything that's happened this week. We'll get into that. Obviously, we will be doing a trade for one of our listeners later as well. But Jordan, what is it that you do, I guess, and how do you describe it maybe for those people that aren't familiar with your work? How would you kind of bring people to your news?
Yeah, so I have a website, Analytics of Dynasty.com, and I've released the 4th edition of my book. I do a yearly Dynasty strategy book called the Analytics of Dynasty. It might sound mathy, but it really isn't. It's more strategic, right? We're looking at player profiles. We're looking at different. This edition I think was different than the other ones, and I very much talked about team building. I went through a lot of the mistakes that I've made in the past, and figured out ways to sort of improve on them. One of the things that I had been a proponent of for most of the time of starting dynasty startup drafts was a productive struggle. And as I've sort of come along in my dynasty, experience and a lot of the research that I've done for the book and the like, I've come to realize that I think I was wrong. And so I wrote a lot about that in a chapter that I call The Confessions of a Recovering Productive Struggler, which is it's fun and it was challenging, and it was a little eye-opening to write about yourself, sort of in a way that you're like, hey, I screwed this up and here's how I did it. And here's why.
That's
I was
not
wrong.
easy to do.
And it was but I think it made, we've got a subscriber chat and there was a good reaction to that. And I think it's helped people. And so it's certainly helped me, right? I mean, it was therapeutic as much as anything for me. And so I do all that stuff. There's a lot of other stuff in there. A lot of stuff on quarterbacks, right? There's mistakes that the market makes on quarterbacks all the time that you just can't, afford to do. And we see them. And I sort of lay out a lot of that stuff in the book as well. A lot of other team building strategies, some startup strategies, just some rookie pick stuff, and like, hey, how to avoid missing, which is, I think, a really big thing. One thing I also like to look at is, what do we know early on in a player's career, right? So like, what's the first year of a rookie's career look like, right? What does that tell us about where they are? Because that's a big deal, right? Especially wide receivers. Like, you can really tell a lot about them really early on, and certain people will have, big upside bets. Other players are going to have cap ceiling bets just off what they did in their rookie season. So a lot of that stuff, just trying to give you some guideposts, and then, each year we're able to apply the different stuff to the different players. So you can find that all analyticsdynasty.com. It's a 2022 edition. And then I have the website as well. I do a dynasty podcast each day. I think last year we did 388 podcasts.
Just a couple.
Yeah, it's fun. It's fun. You know, I was out to visit my wife's family this week, and my brother-in-law was he's checking in to make sure that his sister's husband isn't screwing him, isn't screwing anything up. He's like, so how do you do a podcast every day? And I just texted him tonight, and I was like, you see, I was like, it just never stops.
Yeah.
And so we always have something to cover. So, and our website also has my tiers. It's got a dynasty trade database as well, and a lot of other things that can help you, from a strategic standpoint, be a better dynasty owner. So, so go ahead, check it out, analyticsdynasty.com. We got you covered basically on whatever you're really thinking.
Well, and there's one more thing we got to add here, and that's the Analytics of Dynasty Rebuilding Guide. If you only buy it for chapter 1, 4 pages, if that's all you buy it for, you got your money's worth. That changed everything for me this past season. Really? So think about it. If you're taking over a handful of orphans and or you're just in leagues that maybe you've been in a few years now, and you're trying to figure out, how do I decide, like, when is the right time to rebuild? And it's not just how about going about it, but like when do I do this? What am I looking at? Buy this guide and read chapter 1. It's 4 pages. It will make you a better dynasty player in 4 pages. Like,
so I didn't remember what it was. So I had to open the book and remember what the first chapter was, because it's been a while since I wrote it. But yeah, I mean, like, so it's funny that you say that, because I'll give away the thing. It's basically evaluating where you are at different points of the season, and sort of like, hey, here's the, and it gets kind of geeky in it, and like, here's, basically what you need to make the playoffs, and that whole stuff, and sort of here's what it means if you're through.
It's the math behind the feeling. Right? Because there's a feeling in each league, but it's like, how do I know?
Yeah.
Right. Here's the data. Now you know.
This is when the math checks out, right? If this math checks out, then you know it. Yeah. I love it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny because I talked about in our subscriber chat after the fact, I came up with the idea of like, through like a month, are you good? Are you good bad, you bad good, or you bad, right? So it's like, are you on the good side of the points and the good side of the record? Are you sort of on the bad side of the points and the bad side of the record? You sort of mix and match of there, and that sort of should be really how you think of it, right? Because if you're a good team, you got to be in, right? Like, you kind of, if you're a bad team, you sort of have to admit that, right? If you're and you sort of, right, there's a box with 4 boxes in it, and you have to figure out sort of where you fit in that. Which didn't make it in the book, but it was sort of after the fact we sort of came up with that as a moniker, and I thought it was helpful. So I'm actually, can I preview something that I've been thinking about?
Hell yeah.
Please.
Maybe I'll steal some ideas from you guys in terms of what to look at.
Works for me, yeah.
I'm thinking about, so one of the things about this that's always fascinated me is like what are the benchmarkers that we need? Right. So like, this is a good example. Like, all right, through a month, all right, I'm in a good spot, right? Some of the other stuff that I want to do is like go back and look at like, a month, maybe half the season. And also some of the other stuff about like, where do you finish in terms of like, if you're in a super flex league, like what's your quarterback scoring tell you about how the rest of your team does?
Yeah.
Because it's interesting. I'm sort of in the infancy look of this, and I don't think there's a huge so if you only have so much resources that you can spend on players, right? You've got so many picks, so many roster spots, and you can only really, and you have competitors. So it's tough to be like the perfect team because there's other people trying to do the same thing. So, but what you'll see is like the more, in theory, the more you spend on quarterback, right? The less that you're going to have on the other, I don't know, if it's a 10-man starting lineup and you're starting both 2 quarterbacks, the other 80% of your lineup is going to hurt if you are really, really good at quarterback, just because that means you're not spending a ton on the other spots, right? You're not spending a first-round startup pick on Christian McCaffrey and Jonathan Taylor, for example. You're spending it on Patrick Mahomes and whatever, Dak Prescott, right? So, so there's a balance there. And I'm surprised, and just initially, I don't know if it's a huge impact, but I was surprised initially that it doesn't look like it's that big an impact, which is weird to me. Like, there's just some things in there that I'm just perusing sort of some league stuff, and I'm trying to do a bigger project, but maybe I'll since you guys sort of like this, I'll touch base and sort of get some ideas on what I'm kind of thinking about and see if you guys have any ideas for it. So
awesome.
Well, to talk about this, we talk about strategy every week, right? That we are a big strategy podcast. We are not a we are not a break down the news and get finite graphs about every little thing that happened this week, or like we do Find Me a Trade to talk about strategy. We do everything that we do to talk about the bigger picture. Like, when is a good time to buy and sell people? When is like, should you get into a trade right now? Is there a reason? What is the context? All that stuff that that a lot of other places don't really talk about. When you see a trade poll on Twitter, it's like, okay, that's fine. That's in a vacuum. That's not true value of what's on your team. Like, is this a league that never trades? Like, all those things add up.
Right.
And so we're talking about that all the time here. I mean, that's where we're junkies. We're just put it directly in my veins. That's exactly what we're looking for. But I mean, to kind of hit on that, and then also what you had said before, I think is exactly what we talk about too, is not missing. There's a difference between not missing and hitting, right? Hitting is something everybody aims for. I think a lot of people do better when you just aim not to miss, right? It's like, I'm trying to get some value out of this pick. I'm trying to get something that makes this rookie pick worth more in 6 months than it is today, right? That's really all you're looking for. And we talk all the time about values because that's how you talk strategy. It's like, well, let's take the names out of it. The names don't matter. I mean, yes, they matter, but they don't matter, right? You're looking at a player that has a certain amount of value, and we can value those players in any sort of calculator you want to put in. That's not the point either. It's like there is a value to everything. And I think what you do is like actually what Scott said, is you numerically kind of put some weight to the feelings that we're feeling. And that's kind of in that same vein. That's why we're excited to have you on tonight, because like a lot of what we talk about is pretty much right in your wheelhouse, right? Where it's like, what can we do to make our teams better in March and April before the rookie draft? Right? Yeah, okay, you can make trades. That's a generic answer. But what kind of trades should we be looking for? What kind of moves should we be looking for before the rookie draft? Where should we be looking to make some value adjustments? And I think free agency is a perfect time to do that. And Scott actually hit on it perfectly earlier too, where it's like there are going to be some value bumps. There are going to be some changes in that value in the market that you may not agree with. And I think a lot of times too, people come into this value discussion and they want everyone to agree with them. I am the exact opposite. I love when people disagree with me on value because that's something I feel like I can exploit. I feel like I'm pretty good at this, and I want you to disagree with me. I want you to feel way worse about the player that I like. If we all agreed, this whole game sucks, right? If we're all on the same page about what exactly every player is worth, how boring is that, right? Like, there's no fun there. We all agree they're all worth this. No. It's the speculation. It's the market. And so someone like Scott, who's in 50 leagues, right? That's the game they play. It's a market speculation game. So with that in mind, I guess, Jordan, how many leagues are you in? Like, are you in a bunch of leagues? Do you tend to play a lot of different formats? Like, kind of give us a little bit of a rundown of your, I guess, history in Dynasty real quick, if you don't mind.
Yeah, it's a great question. So I've been playing Dynasty for 10 years. I started playing in the it would have been, I think it was the spring summer of 2012. I was in I had graduated. I'm a law school graduate, so I had passed the bar, and was waiting for my bar results, living in my grandmother's basement, waiting tables. And I was like, I need to do something with my life, and that's when I started playing Dynasty. So, and so that's and so now it's been 10 years. I'm still figuring out exactly what the concept's going to be, but I'm going to go back to my grandmother's house, set up shop in her basement, and record a podcast series. I just have to figure out what it's going to be. Just sort of going back to it, just as a, maybe
it'd be like living the dream. You know what I mean? Like, make it sarcastic. Just like living in my grandma's basement. Like, this is what we do now. You know?
Right. Totally. And it's funny because I actually did well my first draft. I had no idea what I was doing. I just sort of I tripped and fell into like Des Bryant and AJ Green and like I don't know what I was doing. I just started. But yeah, so then it's a typical Dynasty story. It became one league, and then it became two, and then it became four, and then all of a sudden, it's I'm writing about it, right? And then it, I've taken on playing more and more. For me, I play. I think right now I'm in between. I cut back a few leagues. I'm in between 25 and 30 right now. I'll probably add 5 would sort of be my assumption. I'll probably do a couple more startups. Maybe take on another orphan or so. I'm in the midst of a startup right now, so I think 26, 27, something like that. So I assume I'll be right around 30 by the time the season comes around. I do tell people, like, people say it's a lot. I say the difference between 4 and 30 really isn't that big because you're doing all the work anyways, right? The difference between 0 and 1 ends up being a lot bigger than any other gap along the way. So, and I generally play, I play a lot of safe league stuff. I play a lot of I had money stolen from a commissioner service. And so I'm really reticent to sort of go into a league where I don't feel safe, totally safe. And, I give Scott a lot of credit. Safe leagues does that for me. And the most important thing I want is league stability and that my money's not going to be stolen.
Yep.
And then
with that many, yeah.
Yeah. And so that's really of an interest to me. So I do like the institutional commissioner for that purpose. I know other people don't. Other people like to plan other things, but that's of the utmost importance for me. And I know the leagues aren't going anywhere, right? So that's really important for me. So a lot of super flex, tight end premium, I think it's a big deal. I think I have an edge there, so I don't really want to go away from that. I think it's something that I'm good at. I think we can exploit that. Some of the stuff from A has done that. And so I like playing in those. I like the format as well, the size of those leagues. Then I play. I was in a bunch of one quarterback leagues from when I started. I've kept them just because the teams are decent, and I like that experience. I probably wouldn't add another start one quarterback league now, but I still play in some of those. And so, but yeah, a lot of super flex. I would encourage people to play things that make positions more important. So like I play in a couple of really deep tight end premium stuff. So it's 2 tight ends, some stuff that acts a lot like 2 tight end. As you get sort of deeper on 35, 40 man rosters, like you're rostering a ton of tight ends. It's like swinging with a batting weight on, right?
Yeah.
You're playing that, you're getting all those reps in terms of like, hey, James O'Shaughnessy, right? Like, and then you sort of get in your league and you're like, okay, I need a spot starter. You're like, okay, like James O'Shaughnessy could be a guy this week. You know what I mean? Like you're used to playing at a deeper depth. You sort of have that. So I play in some of those deeper leagues, but it's really to more exercise my muscles for what I consider like my core dynasty, which is kind of like your 25 to 30 man super flex tight end premium stuff.
I really like the way you put that with like the batting weight. That's exactly what it feels like too. And I say this to people all the time. There is no right or wrong way to play fantasy. There's no, again, fantasy Twitter was all up in arms this week about it. And it's like, I could care less, man. Like, no, who cares? Go do your thing. Right. But at the same time, I'm a big fan of trying something you're not familiar with, right? Go try something new. Go see what big batting weight you can put on there and be like, all right, I'm not ready for that yet. But guess what? That's still experience. It still tells you what you need to know. And all of that. And the more leagues you do, you're exactly right. 1 to 20 is not that big of a difference. The only thing I will say about that, though, I guess, is the difference is on Sunday morning. It gets to be a little bit of a slog to go through lineups. But once you've done the research and want to put in the investment to make your one league good, the other leagues are easy, especially in the off season when there's really nothing to do. This is my favorite time of year for having 12, 15, 20 leagues, whatever I'm in now. It's like, oh, this is a piece of cake. I can go literally be like, oh, I actually have that player on the league. Oh, let's go. I can go trade today. So I love that. Right.
Absolutely.
But I think too, the way you're putting it though, with like the swinging the bat with the extra weight, that's exactly right too. When you're in deeper leagues or harder leagues, or maybe not necessarily IDP because they're different players, but different formats other than that, it can really make you a better player in the leagues you care more about, or the big money leagues or the home leagues or whatever. I totally agree with that.
Yeah. And the other thing too is when you start playing more leagues, like there's a, I was talking about it with someone recently. They were like, hey, do you like setting lineups? And I was like, you're darn right I like setting lineups, right? Does it suck? Yes. But is it an edge? Yeah. Right. Like, again, and through the COVID stuff, like that was the biggest thing, right? Because people would start people that wouldn't play. Yep. Or they would start someone on the COVID list, or they would start someone that was inactive, and it was hard, right? Those things were hard. And so really optimizing, and I think like if you can be maniacal about it, it sounds, we're playing a game, but if you can be really like focused on, just hitting and fielding ground balls, right? Just the easy stuff of like, hey, my lineup's as good as it can be, right? Everyone's in it. I didn't miss anything, right? And all those things, you have an edge, right? And then figuring out ways to sort of optimize that. And again, then you start doing that over more leagues like that, it adds up, right? And so you have to come up with processes like the setting lineup things is difficult. I dedicate 2 hours to it on Sunday between 11 and 1, right? That's dad's work time, right? Dad's going to work from 11 to 1, right? That's what we do. And fortunately my family is good with it, but that's 2 hours of my time that's what I spend doing. And you sort of have to build, if you're going to play in a lot of leagues, you have to build that in, because you don't want to miss. You don't want to miss, a couple of lineup spots each week, because that's just going to hurt you, So you have to be optimized to that.
And Scott, would you agree? Would you say that, like the difference from 4 to 20 is negligible, except for the lineups, which I know you're not a fan of?
Yeah, I mean, if you're in 6+ leagues, basically, that's what I would consider some form of portfolio. But I was on Dynasty and Chill with Scott Connor last week, and we talked about some of our processes and things like that. So that's a great episode to check out if people want to learn more about that.
Well, and I think too, with the multiple leagues and getting into 30 or 50 or whatever, I mean, obviously that's a commitment that's outside your normal Dynasty player, right? I think to kind of bring this back a second, I mean, we have a lot of people that listen to us that are in those kind of formats that are, play in 20 leagues. But I mean, for new players, like how do you tackle new players that are looking for ways to kind of learn a strategy? And maybe we'll land on this before we get into free agency. But I mean, like, how does AOD help new players? Like, if you just have the one Dynasty league, how do you work with that if you're a new player? Is this something you feel like is, still works for that, or is it more for the advanced player? And just in your own words, what do you think, Jordan?
I think it can help anyone. And so, I mean, I've had conversations with people that play one league for free. And I've had conversations with people that play hundreds of leagues for 6 figures, right? I mean, I've had a variety of different conversations. I think it can help everyone. I am, without firmly committing to this, I'm really interested in the idea of doing an AOD beginners edition. It's something I've thought about a lot.
I was going to ask about that.
That's cool. That's really cool.
And make it free, right? And probably do it in a way that I wouldn't do it in like a book form, but like do some videos, like kind of like I did with the rebuilding. I tried it out with the rebuilding guide. And I did a rebuilding course, right? Which is just some videos, and that go kind of along with the book, just something like that, because I do think, from just generally, there's just some things to know, right? And that's and just and honestly, like before you even play, right? Like read the rules, right? Don't put your money in PayPal because it might get seized, right? Like just things like that if you don't know, they're just going to cause a headache for you. I mean, just little things like that. And then, have an idea of what your plan is, right? And I think, just going into your draft with a plan and trying to execute it, right? And then you can come back and figure out later on if that was a good plan or a bad plan, right? Just some of those things that we just, go into a draft and you just start picking people. Having a plan, I think, is a really good one, So, generally, I think there's some good rules for that in terms of like what you have to determine what you want to accomplish. Like I'm doing a draft right now, and I said I want 2 top 5 quarterbacks. I want 2 top 8 tight ends, right? I want 2 running backs in the top 20, right? That was basically my goal. And then I think there was one, and I had one other accomplishment. I can't remember what it was off the top of my head, but that was what I was shooting at, right? And so I said, all right, like how did those things fit together, right? Watson was going to have to be one of those quarterbacks, was sort of my thought. This was pre him coming back, but that was sort of my bet. And I had to figure out another way to make one, and then figure out some of the stuff with the tight ends, and right, just think about those things, right? And so I think going in with a plan, right, and then understanding really what the types of profiles, right? Very much what you guys said about, you can study players and you can do all the fancy graphs and everything with players. That stuff's fun, but really what you're trying to do is find productive profiles with players that reflect the profiles, right? Yep. So, first round rookie running backs are really good bets. Right. So how do we sort of figure out a way to make those bets? Right. And then because you can get really lost in saying, well, is Najee Harris that good and yada, yada. If you just sort of pull back the blinds and say first round rookie running back, that's a good profile. Let's make that bet. And if we make that bet over and over and over again, no matter who the person is, that's a good bet. Right. Sort of understanding those things, I think, is really interesting and really easy to do. And just by sort of following those things, I think you can play in your first league and do fine,
When I think a lot of times people look at what all of us in the dynasty industry and the content creation industry do and go, oh, that's not for me. I'm new at this. That's for the hardcore players. And I feel like all the time I say to people, like, no, it's really not. Like the basic thought about what we're doing and the basic strategies that we're using on, and Find Me a Trade and everything else, all of that can be drilled down to one league. All of that can be useful. And that's exactly why I like that we do Find Me a Trade, because these are literally leagues that we don't have any insight into if it's the guy's only league or his one of 30. the point is this strategy can be applied in every single league, and our thought process can be like extrapolated out. So that's kind of why I wanted to give you a second, because I think sometimes people look at stuff like Analytics of Dynasty and other, metrics based things, and they think, oh, I'm not ready for that yet. That's too advanced for me. It's not. It really isn't. Some of the stuff that you do is intro level 101 Dynasty stuff that I feel like every manager needs to read. And Scott's a big proponent of it. We've talked about it on the show a couple of times, where like some of the stuff that we see out there is like, it's almost ignored because it's so niche, but at the same time, it's not niche. It's not at all related to so many. You can dumb that down and drill that into everything. So I just wanted to make sure that any listener who's listening to this, that, is maybe feeling overwhelmed or kind of like, I don't know if I'm ready. I don't know if I'm worthy. You are. If you're playing Dynasty, you're in this. Like all of us are junkies. No matter if you have 1 league or 60, it doesn't matter. Right? Anybody listening to this is a fan of Dynasty, and that's all it takes. You can get better at that 1 league and crush your workmates and have a fun time doing it. That's what we're here to help with. Right? That's the whole point.
Totally. And honestly, like I don't do a lot of like, hey, here's the players to pick. Right. My if shtick, if you will, is I don't do that. Right. I don't want to. I mean, we're 25 minutes in, and I don't think we've mentioned a player. Right. And that's the good stuff. Right. Because it's very much. And I've had, and some of the most rewarding things for me have been, I have a group chat, and there's like 50 of us in it. Right. And when it first started, I had a couple of people in there that were very new to Dynasty. One in particular who didn't really know what he was doing. Like, we got together for a strategy call. Like, I told him about the group chat. He's like, oh, I'm nervous about joining. Right. He ends up joining. And he, through like almost a year of being in there, he's like, he can give answers that like, I don't even need to answer stuff, right? Because he knows all the stuff, right? He's had all those mental reps, right? He's read all the books. He's had all those mental reps. He's now expanding his teams. Like, now he's talking instead of coming in at like I don't really know what I'm doing in my first strategy call, he's giving 400 level advice to new people. Right. And like, those are the most rewarding things, because it wasn't me telling him like, hey, here's, go pick like these 6 players. It's like, hey, here are the things to look for. Right. And he went and did that. And that's the most rewarding. I mean, for me as a creator and as someone that, is building relationships with subscribers, that's the best part. Right. Because now I know like, and I know like he's profitable. Right. Like, that's really good. Right. Because what he's done is now he's taken AOD stuff. He's used his subscription, and he's, brought his family on vacation because of it and stuff like that. That's great. And that's sort of how we know that like, hey, we're helping people. Like, that's fun. That's good stuff. And so that's the best part of AOD, because it's really, it's not giving people fish. It's like, hey, here's the pole, and like, here's kind of where you need to go in the lake, but you have to sort of cast it. That's sort of what I try and do.
Well, and I think something that I know Rocky and I have talked about, and Scott, I'm sure you would agree with this. We're just a couple of junkies, right? We're just here hanging out, having fun, talking Dynasty. I mean, like, none of us are experts at this, right? All of us are just playing this game for fun and try to learn from it and try to experience what it is. And all of us are kind of doing this, not necessarily on the fly, but doing this kind of like as a secondary option. And we just want to share what we've learned and just have such a fun time researching and studying. It's like, well, why don't I share that information with everybody else? Right. And I feel like that's why, again, you're a perfect person for this kind of podcast. That's why I'm really glad we could get you on. But we do want to get into some of these free agency talks, because there have been a lot of bombs that have been dropped this week. A lot of, I don't know, just changes in value all over the market. It's been bonkers, and I love it. I'll be honest. This has been one of the best free agencies I feel like I've ever had. I mean, like, this is finally, NFL is playing itself like Madden, where they're just like making trades and don't care. And there's, money being thrown around and people being signed. So I kind of broke this up into what I would say is like 3 segments, and they're not equal. And I think some of this has been talked about to death on other podcasts, and you guys might have even talked about it on other shows, or even last week. I know you talked about some of this, but I want to make sure we get some time. The first one is the retirement and trades. I say retirement because Brady unretired, right? He retired and then he came back. That changes a lot of value on that team.
Did he really retire?
Well, no, and that's a whole different question. So maybe let's start with that. I guess, Scott, what are your thoughts on the Brady unretiring, quote unquote, right? With big quote fingers. Did he retire? What are your thoughts?
I mean, to me, it wasn't a retirement. It's not like he made a big deal out of it. He didn't even mention the Patriots, whatever. He was just kind of, I don't know, playing the game or screwing around. I don't know. He's Tom Brady. He can do whatever the hell he wants. So He didn't really say like he retired. I mean, I don't know. It's one of those fun
He
conspiracies.
didn't file
I
the
guess.
paperwork, right? Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, listen, I tried trading for Brady in so many leagues, and I got shot down. And why is that? Because we all kind of were like, he could still play. So like. I mean, I think I ended up acquiring 1 share, so that sucks. But at the same time, people were paying attention, right? So
yeah, well, and that's what you get for playing in so many leagues with tight, very good group of owners and managers, right? Like they just pay attention. I love that.
No, they're assholes. They're supposed to suck and let me
win. Well, okay, that's a different angle to take it, but I guess you're not wrong there. I guess, Jordan, do you have any thoughts on the Brady news? I mean, is it news to you? Is this something you expected? I guess, or where are you at with it?
I had so hoped as a long-suffering Buffalo Bills fan that I'd put Tom Brady behind me. I had really hoped that, and then I was, we were I was in a restaurant on Sunday night when the news came, or whenever, I think it was Sunday night that the news came out, and I'm like, you've got to be kidding me, right? I was like, I thought this was over with. I thought I've suffered enough. Good thing he's in the other conference and they're not on our schedule. So if we get to a Super Bowl, if we play him again, it'll be in a Super Bowl, and I'll probably be over it by that point. But that was sort of my initial reaction. And listen, I think the good thing about this is last year was similar. Is you could make I do a 2-way go was what I call my team builds. Is like, hey, I want options to contend now, I want options to contend later, and then let's see what happens, and then we can sort of determine, if the first, if we're good 4 weeks in, we kind of know we're in the right direction. If we're not, then we can sort of go from there. Brady's the perfect guy to do that with because he's not expensive, right? You could pair him with, you can do a lot of different combos with him, and he can turbocharge a hot start for a team that is also building for the future, right? And at a cost that isn't a hindrance for that. So I think he's a really interesting player that you have to build around. And I think each draft, as you sort of go into these startup drafts, there is a certain handful of guys that are pivot players, right? Kelsey's probably one, right, in terms of how you view him. Right. Brady, Gronkowski as a cheaper tight end, but Watson,
Waller even lately, like some of those guys where it's like,
totally. And it's very much becomes with a guy like Brady, right? If you sort of go down that road, you have to sort of, you got to push in that direction, right? You have to, if you're going to go that direction, you kind of have to have options that correlate with him because it's not long, right? So pairing a guy like Kelsey with a guy like Brady in a startup draft makes a lot of sense, right? Because you're sort of upping your ante right now. Whereas pairing, Pitts with Brady might not be the same bet, so so I do think thinking about those guys makes a lot of sense. And I think Brady's really interesting, right? I think, if I'm going to do more startup drafts, I bet I'm heavy on Brady just because I think he gives you options, right? He's a force multiplier, and I really like that.
No, and that's a good way to put it. I know you mentioned it last week with Kane, Scott, where hashtag roster construction, right? Like we talk about this all the time. Like none of this is in a vacuum, right? No pick is in a vacuum. No trade is in a vacuum. The roster build matters so much to everything. And I know you were talking about it in regards to the 23 draft, Scott, and it was like, building your team around that. Well, it's the same logic, the opposite. If you're going to take Brady, you're going to take Kelsey, then you better build your team to win now. You've got one good year. You don't have a 2 to 3 year window with guys like that. And I think that's sometimes gets forgotten. It sometimes gets ignored. I like what you said there too, Jordan. I'm the same way. I don't tend to look at Brady as a long-term asset, but if I can get him for the right price and become a win now team with one trade, okay, then I'm a win now team with one trade. Like, okay, that doesn't change much. Like just become, all right, now my pivot is here. And I think a lot of times that comes down to what the other managers in your league are doing too, right? And we talk about this over and over. It's like, if no one wants Brady in your league, you should want Brady. If 100%. Everybody is zigging, you should zag. If everybody else is pivoting for the win long-term and nobody's trying to win now, guess what? Winning now just became 5 times easier. There's instead of 12 competitors, you've got 3. You know what I mean? Like we see it all the time, especially in the Find Me a Trades that we do too, where it's like, sometimes you're looking at the rosters and you're like, man, this team is dominant and they are ready to win. Let's make this better. Let's find something, right? And I think sometimes too, if you're in a lot of leagues, you start to see that more. If you're only in one league, you might look at your team and be like, man, I don't know, I think it can be better. But when you have, 20, 40, 50 leagues, you look at your teams and you kind of go, oh, 30 of these are ready to go. You know what I mean? Like I've seen enough. And that's kind of what those reps are that we were talking about, right? So to kind of go back to Brady for a minute, I think Brady's one of those guys that you can probably get him as a throw-in in Superflex even, because even it depends on who you're trading with, of course, but even teams that are win now might be looking to pivot off of him just because they're like, well, the value bump, right? Now he's coming back. It's official. He might retire again. We don't know. Arians might be gone. Gronk might be gone. Evans might be gone. Who knows what's getting traded next? Like so that team could be terrible, right? So there's a whole lot of question marks, even though he's back. So I think there is a buy window here, but I would say too to people, don't overbuy, don't overpay, right? Be careful what the value is on him. I wouldn't say he's a must-have on your roster. And I think Scott hit on it perfectly. His price is what's making him a buy, not the other way. And I think that's an interesting move for this, like, quote unquote, unretirement. Because, yeah, he didn't file any paperwork. He just didn't say anything. And we all just thought that was him retiring. And again, as a Bengals fan who just lost in the Super Bowl, I know my wife and I both were like, oh, thank God Brady's out of the league. Like, that's one less team we got to worry about. And we play the Buccaneers next year in Tampa Bay, technically. It might be in Europe. We don't know because they've got a European game. But, man, could you imagine, like, a Joe Burrow, Tom Brady, Week 1 Sunday Night Football matchup? Like, oh, man, what a season starter. I'd be down to watch it. I'm just saying. But, like, God, I don't want to see Brady. I just don't want to see Brady.
Better you than me. He has done enough to torment me. Between him and it's gone from him to now Mahomes. Between the two of them, I mean, my beard's already
for 20
going
years as a Bills fan, right?
Yes.
The 20 years you've had to suffer with Brady. I know. Yeah. I get it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, and it's the same stuff, right? And it's you know, it's funny because when Mahomes with the 13 seconds or whatever, like I've lived this life. Like I know how this story ends. It's just a guy that's not named Brady. It's just his name's Mahomes now. Like I've lived this story. Right. So I'm glad it's you guys faced him and not us.
We'll see. Hopefully we don't have to. But the other definitely big news I want to talk about is the one that just dropped today. Now we're recording this on Thursday night. So if you're listening on Friday and more news has dropped that we're not talking about, that's why. But right before we recorded, I would say almost an hour, maybe an hour and a half before we started tonight, Devonte Adams gets traded to the Raiders. Now, I know this is kind of fresh. We're all still kind of reeling from it a little bit. But I mean, my initial thoughts are, you know, Rodgers takes a hit on this, right? If he doesn't have Adams, we got a lot of time left. I get that. Who knows who they're going to get? But the fact that we don't know is what gives him that negative in my book. I think, and I mean, maybe I'm alone on this, but I think Adams goes up here because he's going to a team getting paid $141 million for 5 years. That's a team that wants him, that's going to build around him, that's going to make sure that he succeeds. I think it's good for him in that regard. I think Derek Carr is up. Waller is up. Maybe Renfro is down in value for this. I mean, it's kind of all speculative. We don't quite know what all to think of it, but man, that AFC West is just becoming a powerhouse now with Adams in the Las Vegas Raiders team. So, Scott, I guess what are your opinions on this as an initial reaction to this Adams trade?
Yeah, I mean, this is why I hate like these, you know, rapid reactions. It's just like I don't know.
Not looking for a hot take. I'm just like curious. First reaction.
I don't know what it means. I mean, my initial reaction is, well, Derek Carr sucks, so that hurts Adams. You know, adding Adams hurts Renfro, it hurts Waller, hurts. I mean, these are just initial reactions. Are they true? I don't know. Probably not. I got to look at the data. I mean, we have a whole new system in there, right? Yep. It's McDaniels now. So, I mean, there's so much that needs to be put together here. But like, if this is what I would say, like, what's the actionable advice? I mean, the actionable advice is if people think that like Adams is just going to suck now. I mean, remember him and Carr played together in college, so yes, they do have some sort of rapport. Okay, they're good friends still to this day. Literally, Derek Carr's brother talks about it every day on NFL Total Access and NFL Network. So this is something he's wanted for a long time. They've wanted to play together. You know, if anybody's saying that he's going to take a big hit, maybe now's the time to trade for him. You know, Rodgers, same thing. If they're like, oh, well, Rodgers, he doesn't have Adams, who's he going to throw to? Listen, they'll figure it out, okay? It doesn't matter really who he's going to throw to because he's Aaron Rodgers. So, again, if you can buy him, if you're on a contending team and now's the time where people are overreacting, maybe take advantage of that. Like, people that are getting emotional, you know, this is what I do in my everyday life too, is we take advantage of the emotion. You know, let's take the emotion out of it. And let's look at it logically and make good decisions. And I bet if you can get Rodgers for 80% of what you could have got him for yesterday, you're probably going to be pretty happy with that.
Yeah. Yeah, and his price might go up tomorrow when they trade for Juju or whatever. I mean, like we don't know what's coming next, right?
Exactly.
So that's kind of where I was just kind of curious what your gut was saying, not necessarily
Right.
where you're going to land. It's like initial reactions are not hot takes. I'm entirely with you on the logic to it. Hot takes are different. In my opinion, hot takes are after you've seen all the facts, you then go against the grain and pick something that is an outlier. That's a hot take, and I don't think that's what we're talking about. We're not a hot take show. We never have.
Right.
But we are a little bit of the value change gut feeling. Where should we go next? Kind of where should we take this? Like you said, actionable advice. And so that's kind of where I'm looking at it. Like where my gut tells me this, I'm not making any moves based on this. To be honest, I'm not making any changes in value on any of this until I do more research. 100% with you. But in my opinion, that's kind of true of all of free agency, right? Like there's a lot of things that change in free agency that can be crazy and go up and down all over the place. I'm rarely making trades during this point in the season. Right. Where it's like I might make waiver ads in Dynasty. I might make, speculative players like Jonathan Ward is on a roster now and he wasn't before. Players like that where it's like they're on waivers, they're free. I'll take a flyer. Maybe he's the guy, right? Maybe Connor gets hurt again. Like, I don't know. Maybe they add 2 more players and Ward's still on the bench. Guess what? I drop him and doesn't matter. Right. That's not what we're looking for. I'm just saying, like, Adams, in my mind, that changes his value. And to me, that makes him a do not do anything with. Right. Don't overpay for him, but don't sell him for peanuts. And I guess, Jordan, are you on that same page? Is that generally how you look at free agency for now, or you kind of make those snap reactions and just sort of play the market for their values?
Yeah. I mean, I think a good source of value is finding where the market, starts hating on a player where I think it's unreasonable. Right. I think if the answer to this is Darren Waller, it goes down in price, I'm in on Darren Waller. And I think that's probably the result. The thing that's fascinating about this, again, if Rodgers, I think this takes some top off of Rodgers' ceiling would be my assumption. And the problem is, as I look at this right now, I don't know how they fix this in terms of anything resembling a wide receiver 1. It looks like Jarvis Landry might be landing in Atlanta. I don't know what Juju Smith-Schuster's deal with, and I don't know if he's a wide receiver 1 at this point.
Yeah, I don't know if that matters.
Yeah, I don't know if if they're in on a guy like Julio. Like, I'm just trying to figure out ways that they could potentially be in on somebody. I joked about maybe Cole Beasley. I mean, as crazy as that might sound, like he could be a good option for them to take a good chunk of targets. Who's out there, right? I'm just trying to think about who those guys could be and what that would look like. So I think it concerns me a little bit that there isn't a clear answer, right? There's no succession plan behind Devonte Adams. That concerns me a little bit with Rodgers. I think he'll figure it out, but that's a concern. And I think you go to, you look at Vegas. I think this probably helps Carr on a multi-pronged way. I think this probably helps Carr from a pure production standpoint. I think they probably, the inference would be, hey, they might throw the ball more too. I think that's one thing you could infer from this. The other thing is it makes it more, in just a pure survival of Derek Carr, this makes it more difficult to find somebody else that's not him, right? He's been long rumored to be on the potential move. I think the carousel's probably stopped. They're probably going to have to extend him. This probably signals, hey, they're not in on, using that first to upgrade at the position, and I don't know what that would be at this point. They haven't made that move. So that's probably the end of that speculation. I would expect it gets extended pretty soon. I think all of I look at this more of like the ancillary effects of it. I think it probably helps Carr from like a longevity perspective and probably a ceiling perspective as well.
Well, I think too, to kind of hit back on what we were just saying too, and you're saying exactly where I wanted to go with this, is that the market right now isn't certain about what it feels like, right? The thing just happened. The markets are closed. We'll see tomorrow at 8 a.m. when the market's open. Go, right? And it's that same kind of logic. Like, don't make a trade until we see where the market is. If the market comes out low on Waller and they're saying, hey, Waller he was crap last year with Adams, he's crap this year, and his value takes a 20% drop, I'm in. I'm with you 100%, right? And the same logic goes for Rodgers. Like you said, Scott, if he takes a dip and everybody's like, I'm out, right? Then I'm in. That's what we were just saying before. If everyone's zigging, that's when you zag. So I don't want to make it look like there's actionable info today, right? This podcast is being recorded when there really isn't time to know that yet. And I think a lot of the time what we end up doing is responding to the market. We don't make the market. We just react to the market. And I think that's the best way to play this game, in my opinion, is to find a spot where the market differs from your value And to do that, you need to first let the market find where it's going to be, but then also do your own research a little bit. Go out there and find some information and listen to some smart people that we bring on this podcast, like yourself, Jordan, and say, all right, what do these guys think, right? You're not going to have an answer in 1 hour. It's going to take more time than that to come up with your actual reasonable response for anybody, right? And I think sometimes, and the emotions get the better of all of us, right? We've all been in our feelings and like, you know what, I'm done with this guy. I'm trading him this week because he did crap for me on Sunday Night Football, and it's the game everybody watched. And no, that never helps your team, right? Just play the long game. And again, if you're in one league, that's much harder to do than if you're in 30. If you're in 30, it's easier to just say, well, I'll see how it goes in 3 weeks, in 4 weeks, 5 weeks, and see how it goes. When you're in one league and you only have those 25 rostered players in your dynasty league, and I know because I started in one league, right? And it was like, I got to make a trade. I got to get this guy off my team. It's everything. It's my entire dynasty. 100% of my teams have this guy. You know what I mean? Because it's just one league. And so I think that's another way to make this, like, if you're in just the one or two, take a breath, pause, don't freak out. I always tell people this, and I'm sure that you would agree with this too, Jordan, is that we don't have to set lineups right now. Right? There's no reason to make a move. There's no possible reason why you need to worry about who's starting in your wide receiver 2 slot. Doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. If you can trade Devonte Adams as someone thinks that he's crashing, and you can trade for Devonte Adams and send away a player like, I don't know, Antonio Gibson or something, you know what I mean? Like whatever you think is a lower value player, but the other guy is really high on, that's a worth doing trade, right? And that's what we're all about. And that's where some of these NFL trades can really come into play. So the other one that I did want to bring up, and just before we get into some of the signings, and a lot of those we can kind of blend together, but the other big one I wanted to mention was Amari Cooper traded to the Browns. Now, you mentioned Jarvis Landry, of course. He was cut. Baker seems to be moving on. I mean, we've had a couple days with this Amari Cooper stuff. I'm curious, I guess, and maybe, Scott, I'll start with you, I guess. Where are you with Amari Cooper? Is this better for him? Do you feel like this is a good move? Still too many questions, can't really decide. I mean, where are you at with Amari Cooper right now?
I mean, as long as Baker's not his quarterback, then I think it's fine. But
so if it's
really,
Case Keenum, we're okay? Like, you're fine with that?
Oh, okay. 100%. Yeah.
Okay.
Case Keenum can throw to him all day. I mean, yeah, he's not going to be in that Dallas offense. He's not playing with a top quarterback in Dak, so I don't see how it really helps. But at the same time, who else is there? Who are they throwing to? So he could be a volume guy. Yeah, hey, look at that. It happens so fast, right? Here's your rapid reactions. Everyone's like, well, so much for Njoku. And then 2 days later, they cut Hooper. Right? So you know what I mean? Like things change so fast this time of year. I mean, now we're happy for Njoku somewhat. But yeah, who knows? Who are they going to sign? Somebody else? What are they going to do with that offense? Are they going to get a quarterback? So I can't really make any decisions based on that right now. There's just too many questions. He's kind of getting up there for me, and he's never really been a consistent guy as it is. So I'm probably not too excited about him, but I mean, you can't really sell him. You're not going to get anything for him.
I was just going to say, like, he's not a buy, but he's not a sell either, right? Like, he's one of those kind of perfect middle ground. And again, that's what a lot of, I think, and again, maybe that's the overarching theme of this show tonight is, don't make any crazy moves, but like, you don't have to buy or sell anybody, right? Like none of this has to happen today. And I think a lot of times too, when it comes to someone like Cooper, who's kind of had a questionable history, he's been a top tier receiver in name and value and all this, but he's playing on the Browns with Baker. Who knows? If it's not with Baker, maybe that's better. There's so many questions. It's hard to value. I mean, is that kind of where you're at too, Jordan? The same as what Scott was saying?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because we've got the AOD trade finder. So it searches like 6,000 MFL leagues for trades involving Amari Cooper. And we have had very little action on him, which isn't that common for a player to have very little action. And I'm talking like less than 6 trades in the last month.
That's crazy.
That tells you something about a player.
Yeah.
Right. That tells you something about a player. And so you look, before this trade, it was him for Elijah Mitchell. Since this trade, we've really only got one trade. Again, this is a static market, I think is really notable. It's Amari Cooper and Van Jefferson for Amon-Ra St. Brown. I mean, I think Amon-Ra St. Brown's really interesting what he did last year. I think if you're getting Amari Cooper plus for Amon-Ra St. Brown, you're probably on the right side. Van Jefferson's debatable about how useful he is, and probably less so now than he was maybe when that trade was made 72 hours ago. But, I've thought about trying to get a first for him. I did that in a number of leagues and had zero success. Laughed
like
at
sending Cooper for a first, right? Like sending him away for a first. Okay.
Correct. And and then that led me to believe, hey, is there a buy for a second window, which I haven't fully explored. I think probably tomorrow will be the day that I try and get into that a little bit and just poke around. Because I think at that point, right, even if he's not a big time difference maker, at least he can eat some innings for you at the wide receiver position, which is really what I want from a player in that.
I love that, eat some innings. I love that baseball talk. That's exactly right. Yeah.
Totally.
Just chew through some of those middle innings that nobody wants, right? And just get you some points on the board. Nothing
absolutely
wrong with that.
Absolutely. And you need, one of the things I talk about in this, and I talked about one of my favorite pitchers, Jamie Moyer, in this edition of AOD, just the value of a player that you can go out there and just over the course of a season. I don't really listen, I know that part of putting Amari Cooper out there, there's going to be some variance. There's going to be some variance with all wide receivers, but I know generally at the end of the day, he's probably going to be a 7-8 target a game guy. It's kind of what it's going to average out to be. And there's a value to that, which is in my lineup. At the end of the year, it's going to be between wide receiver 15 and 30. Right. And if I just sort of put him out there every week, I sort of know that's probably close to what I'm going to get. And that's valuable because that allows me to do different things roster construction wise. Right. Yeah. So if I can do that at a second round rookie pick valuation, I could probably do that with, I don't know, 20 different guys, right? You can make that similar. Brandon Cooks for even cheaper, probably. Yeah. Those types of bets that you can make. I look at Cooper in that light now, which is hey, if I can sort of get him for that cost, that's great. If I can sell him for a cost that someone is treating him higher than that, if it's a move on Baker or something like that, where someone's treating him like a first, I can sort of trade that spread, right? Trade Cooper for that, and I can use another asset to go after a guy that can eat innings for me in that range, like a Cooks, if Landry lands someplace where he's a nominal one, something like that. Any number of other guys that I could sort of do that with, I'll try it. So that's I think a spot where you can arbitrage that a little bit and make some good bets.
I think too, and Cooper is a prime example of this, and it's a perfect way to segue into this kind of topic and more strategy talk. Even is that when you're on the clock at 2:06 and you just don't see anyone you really like, you send that offer for Cooper then, right? You send, because that's when rookie fever is at its peak. You're on the clock is ticking. There might be a guy that guy wants. And it's hey, you know what? I am kind of done with Cooper. No one sent me anything for him. I thought maybe somebody would send me a first, and I never got that. Maybe 2:06 right now on the clock. I can get David Bell, who's still on the clock, right? I can get, Justin Ross or whoever, some guy that I really like, and I don't have any picks until 3:06. So yeah, I'll trade it now. That's where I feel like he's again, when do you make this trade? There's no reason to trade for Amari Cooper right now, unless you can get him for a song, right? That's the logic. And I think sometimes people kind of misunderstand this as a bad thing, but I think it's just the way it is. But the buy price and sell price are always different for players, right? The price I'm willing to pay is always going to be different than the price it's going to take to get him off my team. If he's on my team, it's because I like him. Therefore, there's a premium on that, right? And I think sometimes people look at it well, you would only pay a second, but you're not going to give a second. I'm like, no, that's not how it works.
Right.
You know what I mean? That's just not how it works. I don't know how else to put it. But I think too, when you're on the clock in your rookie draft, when that pick is at its most valuable, that's when you can kind of play it even 2:06 is like a first, right? Because now there's a player on the board that I thought was a first round talent. You know what? I will make that trade. It's not a first. Right. And so the person sending it, if I'm sending 2:06, it's not a first. But if I send it today, it's clearly not a first. There's no one that's going to say it's a first. But when I'm on the clock, it might be seen that way, right? And that's that valuation difference. So I think that's kind of a worthy topic that I don't know if it doesn't get it talked about enough, but I just feel especially when you're talking trades and kind of value bumps and ups and downs, why make that trade today? I can't tell you how many times people send me DMs what do you think about this offer? I'm okay, well, why are you making that trade right now? Will that trade not be there in a week or 2 or 6? Is that trade going away? I mean, we're in March. It's entirely different on Thursday night and a guy plays in 3 hours. Make the trade, right? That's different. It's during the season, you got to make the trade. It's week 6. I get it. But we're in March. You don't have to make that trade today, right? And especially when rookie picks are involved. You know what I mean? Just hold. Because if they want that rookie pick, I can't tell you how many times too I've had an offer sent to me and I smash decline. I'm nope. And that says a lot right there too, because then the guy sends another offer with an added third, and I'm just smash decline. Nope. because he knows he's going to keep up is till I start to think about it, right? So the quicker and easier you do that, take yourself the emotions out of it, and you can make some crazy value jumps on things just by doing little things like that, and just kind of playing the game.
Totally. And that's one thing that it's funny because I try and put a number to something and,
no, you never.
What do we say? The math behind the feeling, right?
That's right.
I one place that I don't think we can really do that with and is sort of the timing of trades. And so it's a really tough, or the timing of a transaction generally. It's a really tough thing to get right. It's something I've tried to sort of study more. It's more anecdotal, right? It's more feel than it is anything I can say like, hey, here's kind of a number to think about. But I always think about like a couple of ways to guide that is, why do I need to do this deal now? Which is what you just talked about. Does this deal go away? Right? If you're trading, if you're at 101 in a rookie draft, the answer to the question is no, it doesn't go away. Right? Yep. That demand probably doesn't go away until you're on the clock, right? Outside something crazy happening.
As soon as you make the pick, the value drops tremendously. Right. That's the other catch is like making the pick. Right. We're like driving the car off the lot. It's the same kind of logic, right? Like as soon as that pick gets a name to it, it loses value. It loses the allure. So you have to there's that threading the needle. But yeah, I'm with you.
But until you sort of make the pick, right, it has gone up in value. It's unlikely to go down in value. Let's just put it that way. And there's a big demand for it. Once you pick a player, that might not be the player that other people are going to pick, right? Especially in a class like this, that maybe there's not a consensus one, right? There might be more bidders for the pick than there is the player that you take at the pick. So you have all those things. But I do think, like, I had a subscriber today when we were talking about, they wanted to make a trade for a big quarterback. It's like, well, I can make a Dak deal. And I was like, you could. I said, the problem is it was like a Lance-centric deal. It was like a Lance for Dak-centric type deal. And the problem with that is it's a good trade, right? It was the trade that he wanted was a good trade. I said the problem with that is it rules out the ability to trade Lance for someone better later on.
Yes.
And you might be able to, and this is, I think, getting into like graduate level dynasty, right? I think if you make that deal, you're ahead odds wise. But one of the things that's tough to get right, and I think a lot about, is how do I time that, right? So it's I want that to be where my team is in August, but do I want to make the deal right now for, to trade Lance for Dak? I want to make it really before Lance plays, because I don't want to endure that risk. And I want the upgrade to a good, to a solid quarterback. But I might be able to sort of harness some of that hype to go from Lance to an even higher quarterback, whether that's Josh Allen, right? I might be able to make that jump from Lance plus other assets for someone looking to maybe reset the clock. That's maybe a gettable thing, whereas it might be more difficult to actually go from Lance to Dak and then go from Dak to Josh Allen, right? That might actually be a more difficult, even though for me, it's a higher price quarterback. That might actually be a more difficult pivot. And by making the deal now for Lance, you actually might rule out making a deal later on that might even be better, right? Just because you're sort of pinning yourself into almost a similar type of quarterback than the quarterback you'd be trading for. You don't have that paradigm, that difference there. So I do think thinking about those things when you're making a deal, why are you making it right now, right? You should almost never be making a deal for need right now, right? Because
exactly.
I want to write a chapter.
There is no need.
Right. I want to write a chapter of all the things. I should just start saying things that I believe and just start writing them down. And then, just right now, it's March 17th as we're recording this. Happy St. Patrick's Day to everybody.
That's
right. Just write some things down that I believe and then reevaluate them in August. And if you went through it last year, it was like Cam Akers was going to be good. ETN was going to be good. J.K. Dobbins was going to be good. Like Watson was going to be good. Like all these things that suffered just catastrophic failures. There's just so much that you don't know. And what you could be a position of weakness right now could actually turn out to be a position of strength.
Oh, yeah.
Vice versa, right? What could be a position of strength presumably right now might be a bad position of weakness. So maintaining flexibility, and you're really trying to make a deal for the best assets for the best team and then figure out kind of the positional fit later on.
And something to kind of piggyback on that, something I tend to say a lot is, well, how much risk do you have on your roster already? You know what I mean? Like there is a risk profile that I like to have a little bit of risk, but not all the risk, right? I don't want a roster with every risky player. That's too much risk for me. It's not the way I like to play it. There are definitely teams and leagues that I don't mind doing that. But in general, on the whole, I like to have some risky, high upside, low side, like really like boomer bust kind of players. Someone like a Zay Jones on my bench, someone like a DJ Chark who's injured, or like a Calvin Ridley right now is a big, huge, gigantic value difference from his high to his low ceiling. So it's like sometimes you have to look at it too and say, well, do you have a lot of those guys already? Then you shouldn't be trading for more of those guys. You should be adding some more stability and some high floor players to kind of get you through. And again, I wrote an article for Fantasy Pros a couple months ago, I feel like, where it's drafting for balance. Like find a balance that you enjoy, find the team that makes the team work. And again, goes back to roster construction, right? Like right now, lineups don't matter, but rosters matter. Having a roster that is able to withstand this chaos of the offseason is not easy to do. There's going to be everybody's got a roster that's got players moving teams or other players moving that changes the value of their players and all that. That's just the nature of the game. But if you can leverage some of that risk and trade away risk for stability or vice versa to kind of keep your team in the hunt in the offseason, that's all that matters. And I mean, God, Scott, how many times have we said it? Trade away running backs, right? Like just send running backs. Like we don't need running backs in
every
March.
day.
Get rid of them, right? Trade it for something more stable. Trade it for something that's not going to lose value because of one injury. I mean, running backs already have such a short lifespan. When they turn 25, 26, the Undertaker is done with them, right? They're not coming back out of that casket. But receivers, we see it all the time where they can play 28, 29, 30. So like if you're rebuilding, maybe that's a roster construction you should look at. Is like, well, maybe I pivot from this player, Mike Evans or even Ridley or who knows, down a little bit to a Juju plus a piece, because Juju's a couple years younger. He's still got some crazy high upside. He's got a low floor, but like that risk might be what my team needs right now. And add that in a second and I'm good to go, right? And again, we're talking variable different trades, but I think that all kind of goes into the same strategy we've been talking about. Now, we've been mentioning that we're doing free agency talk, and that's kind of the plan, but all of this has just been trades. And I think we're already at an hour, right? And so I think most of this is just, let's run through some of this, who's signed with who. We're not going to hit everybody, but I do want to list some of this, and maybe, you can pick one out of this if you want, Scott and Jordan. Each of you kind of pick one to talk about for a few minutes before we get into Find Me a Trade, because we could talk all night, but I don't think our listeners want to listen for 6 hours, as much as that'd be fun for us. So real quick, let's go through some signings. These are players that have switched teams that I think are kind of fantasy relevant or could be fantasy relevant. By no means is this list exhaustive. There is a whole ton of signings, but I think the big team at least that was making moves this week anyway was the Jaguars. They spend big. They go out and get Christian Kirk, Zay Jones, and Evan Ingram, which I think is a terrific idea on paper, but man, those players are all just, oof. We got Trubisky signed by the Steelers, which again, there's some talk on that one. Cedric Wilson and Chase Edmonds both get signed by the Dolphins. That's interesting. The Dolphins team is shaping up. They've got some other signings too. The one I thought this is offensive related, but it's Alex Kappa and Ted Karras signed by my Bengals. We're finally getting some offensive line. That could change that whole team, right? That helps fantasy. In a similar vein, CJ Uzomah left the Bengals, is now signed with the Jets. And then Chark left the Jaguars, is signed by the Lions. So those are some of the ones, just to kind of toss it out there, that I think are all big signings this week in free agency. Scott, do any of those kind of stand off, or you kind of feel like the one you want to bring up and spend a couple of minutes chatting about here?
Yeah, Evan Ingram. Evan Ingram sucks, but I said if he goes to Jacksonville, watch that go up, because listen, if he can play that Zach Ertz role in Peterson's offense, I love that. Now he's a little bit smaller than Ertz.
I don't think he has the hands that Ertz
and
does
he's
either,
certainly not the blocker, but listen, they're going to utilize him because pretty much everyone else sucks. And then they signed, a couple guys that are questionable. And I mean, I think Kirk's a good player, so that's fine. But yeah, I mean, I think he's going to have a lot of opportunity, and, could he get you 60, 70 catches this year? Sure. Will he have 20 drops? I don't care. I don't get negative points for drops, so I really don't care. I don't care how many drops he has.
Yeah.
Does everyone hate Deontay Johnson? Is he not like universally loved? The dude drops balls left and right. Now he did better last year.
He was hated. A year ago he was hated, but he fixed it.
Oh,
right?
I don't know. Try trading for him.
I'm saying a year ago it was easier. It's harder now. That's all I'm saying.
All right. I mean, I don't care how many. Listen, if you have 24 drops, that means you probably got 100 targets. So give me that all day at tight end. I mean, almost all my leagues at this point are tight end premium. So I'm happy to have a guy that essentially everyone hates, you know, because you've had so many years of just like disappointment,
letting you down.
Great. Give him to me, because I think he's a guy that he could fill in for me on that, you know, that spot where I need him. And then that way I feel, you know, less worried about having a Kelsey, right? Is he going to fall off the cliff? You know, I don't know. Well, I've got Ingram behind him now, so I don't feel terrible about it. If he comes out in the first few weeks and has, you know, big games, great. I'm trading him. I'll be the first one to trade him. I'm not saying like I love this guy, but I just think he falls into a good situation. And I mean, it's something I brought up here a few weeks ago. And so I love that kind of came true. You know, and I like the opportunity. I mean, I will take Ingram in Jacksonville over any of these random, like, you know, Uzama to the Jets or whatever. Right. Like, who cares, really? It's not, he had a couple of good games, whatever. He's your average 3 for 30 guy. You know, I mean, there's 24 of those guys on any given week. So I'll take anyone who isn't that, you know, and then we'll see what happens from there. And listen, what's the worst that can happen? He sucks. Okay, he already sucks. What's the difference? You know what I mean? Like, it
all matters about the cost. That's what it's all about, right?
Yeah,
the cost is so low, the risk is so low, the reward is so high. Why not? I totally agree with your logic on that. I guess, Jordan, are you on that same page? And then which one of these guys do you want to talk about for a minute?
Yeah, I mean, I love the Ingram. I actually love the Ingram profile. One of these stats I've been toying around with is the PPR points per route run. And when you look, like, he's had a stark drop. He was actually pretty good his first 3 years, and has a stark drop the past couple of years. Kind of corresponds with some bad quarterback play. So, I mean, you know, is he the perfect prospect at this point? No, but is he I look at these guys and think, who's a guy that can make a difference and stand out? Like you said, I don't think it's CJ Uzama, right? We have seen Evan Ingram make a difference. I think that there's probably still that there. One that I like, you know, I don't know if he'll ever get the volume, but who's actually been really good on a per route run basis. It just hasn't gone that well for him. And it's funny because I didn't like him coming out, and now I'm interested because 5 years have gone by and everyone's passed him by, but it's OJ Howard, right? On a really, really cheap speculative deal.
Your Bills.
He's on waivers in a lot of leagues.
Yeah.
Right.
People gave up, you know.
Right? I don't know if he ever makes it to the point where he makes a difference. But one of the things that I looked at was his points per route run for his career, 0.36. Where does that rank? Top 14% in terms of guys. And when you look at guys, let's just contextualize that for a second. When you look at guys like Ingram, when you look at guys like Gesicki, when you look at the other guys that are sort of in this class that are we're in this free agent class that ended up getting tagged. Where are they? About top 30%. So all around the same, right? By the way, like Ingram looks a lot like Gesicki, just it's kind of dispersed a little bit differently in terms of some of the efficiency stuff. Okay. So Howard punches really high on that. Again, is it a long shot? 100%. But that's the types of bets that I love to make. Is like, hey, if this player, like if this player gets an opportunity, we kind of know that he's efficient, and it's just a matter of getting more opportunity. You know, may it not ever come? It might not ever come. But if it does, I think we can feel a little bit more confidence that we kind of have an idea that the player can play. So I think that one's interesting. The other one, you mentioned Trubisky. From a football perspective, like, we should learn from this dynasty-wise. This was, I think, the best free agent deal of all of free agency, because it gave them an upside shot for virtually no cost. They did it without the cost of a rookie pick, and it precluded them from doing nothing.
Right.
It doesn't stop them from trading up in the draft. It doesn't stop them from taking someone and just sitting there. It doesn't stop them from it could allow them to trade down, and maybe they like, you know, quarterback 5 in this class, and they want to say, hey, let's just see how this plays out for a year. Right. And if Trubisky's not good, they can go readdress it next year.
Nothing to lose.
And if he's good, if he actually is good, I mean, this is a quarterback who, on a deal not dissimilar from this, led his team to the playoffs, right? So when you sort of start looking at that and you say, all right, and he doesn't, again, it's really tough to make this comp, but he doesn't look worse than Ryan Tannehill through this point of his career. Is Ryan Tannehill a huge difference maker? No, but is he a reclamation project that was like worth a spec bet on? 100%. And it's paid off for Jacksonville. Huge, right? That was a huge payoff for them. I think in terms of like bets, like asymmetric, pure upside bets with very little risk, this is like the best. I love those types of bets. That's an OJ Howard type bet. If you're thinking dynasty, I love that bet by Pittsburgh because it was riskless. And and the best part about that is like, we should learn from that, because us as dynasty GMs, dynasty players, we're only subject to our own clock. Right. So if there's a situation where we find ourselves kind of in a bad spot, right? Maybe you had Brady and Brady retires and he truly did retire, or you lost Breeze and maybe you were playing something with, you had Roethlisberger, right? And you were sort of struggling along, but now you're sort of stuck in a position. You could do a couple of things. Like you could go the Washington route, which is like, all right, I'm going to trade for this middling guy. I'm going to spend a whole bunch of assets to basically overpay for Carson Wentz. Or you could be like, all right, like, listen, I can play the long game on this, right? I'm going to take a bunch of small shots, right? I'm going to take Trubisky. Like, I'm going to wait and see what comes to me in a rookie draft instead of trading up. I'll wait and see what comes to me in the middle of a rookie draft. And then I'll just address the position there if it's right, or if not, I've got an asset that I can later trade for one, right? And you sort of do that. I think it's dynasty. You're really able to act like the Steelers did here, which is be patient, not swing haphazardly, not, a drunken swing at a piñata, but really a thoughtful sort of say, all right, like, let's make an upside bet. And if it doesn't work out, we're not going to all lose our jobs.
Well, and let's keep in mind, this is still before the draft too. That's why I like this totally as a perfect move, because like, why not? You've got a hole where Roethlisberger's retired. They've had the same QB for the last 20 years. I feel like 18 years or whatever. Roethlisberger's been there. That whole Pittsburgh, I guess, idea, the whole way they build their teams is longevity. They put somebody in there and they stick with them. And I feel like that's not what Trubisky is. So it's kind of zigging when everyone's zagging. It's the same thing we were just talking about, right? And it's like, hey, this guy didn't have a great job, didn't do a great job, I guess, in general, but that was mostly Nagy in Chicago. Scott's a big fan of Nagy. Kidding. But he did pretty well. He did pretty well as a backup in Buffalo. And I think he showed at least that he can do the job and perform the task and be a better bridge quarterback than Goff is on a much cheaper contract and much less risk. So it's almost like a why not? It's a win-win, right? It's a, that's like your good. It's the same kind of thing.
Yes.
Like the worst thing that happens is he doesn't do well. Okay, that's great. Doesn't matter. Like they're not banking on him to win them a title. They're really just saying he's better than the other alternatives. We'd rather him than Winston or pick a name out of a hat, right? Like there's a couple of Mariota or whatever. Like those guys aren't going to make or break your team either. At least Trubisky has the ability to hold the game together. And that team, I mean, with Deontay and Chase and Najee Harris, I mean, they're kind of built to win now. So I don't know, maybe we see if we can make it work. And we do that kind of half rebuild that we do in Dynasty, where it's like, retool, not a whole rebuild. I don't need to take it down to the studs. I just need one or two pieces. Maybe I can make this work. And maybe Trubisky's a guy. So I'm right there with you. I think he impacts a ton of players on that team for Dynasty. And it's impossible to know on March 17th what that valuation difference is going to be. It's just impossible. Yeah. So, I mean, for me, Pittsburgh is a team that I wouldn't say avoiding, but I'm not making any big splash trades involving Pittsburgh players for now. I got to do some more digging on that and I definitely want to see how the draft goes. Because if they draft a receiver and there's draft a quarterback and there's like a battle for quarterback, that changes things again. Right. So we'll kind of see how it goes. But no, I like that Trubisky move too. And I think that was a very interesting one. Last, I do want to kind of hit on a couple of guys that re-signed that kind of decided to stay with their teams and see if there was any talk we wanted to have about them, because sometimes these are, I wouldn't say just as interesting, but can provide some insights into what the team wants to do and what the player wants to do. I only put 4 on here. And again, these are not exhaustive, but these are just some of the ones that I thought were interesting. But Gallup staying with the Cowboys, that's an interesting one. I don't think a lot of us expected that, but with Cooper leaving, it makes more sense. Cousins staying with the Vikings. There was some talk about him potentially leaving or being traded. Seems like that's not happening. James Conner staying with the Cardinals. Obviously, Edmonds left. We mentioned earlier going to the Dolphins. Is this Conner's job? And then the last one, which I thought was the most entertaining, and it involved your Bills there, Jordan, was J.D. McKissic signing with the Bills, and then, oops, never mind, I'll stay with Washington. So any of those jump off the page to you, Scott, that you want to hit on a little bit more or get into some more info about?
Not really. I mean, I think it's interesting that a lot of these guys end up just staying with their own teams. It's always, I think this year there was less than there normally is. I think the last couple of years that's been pretty common. Fantasy wise, I don't know. Like Cousins, again, I don't think he's a great quarterback, but just because there's so much need for a quarterback and there's so many teams that just wish they had Cousins, then he's still valuable, and O'Connell already knows what he can expect with him. And so, they might as well stick with him. A lot of this stuff it's boring, but like at the same time, things change too, right?
Exactly.
Because, now we're talking, well, Gallup re-signed with the Cowboys. How much does that change? Well, I don't know, because now Cooper's gone and Cedric Wilson's gone, and so are they going to draft someone else, right? And so again, there's a lot of variables that go into it. So even though it does seem kind of boring, things can really change. And so I think you have to again take advantage of, if anyone thinks that, in my opinion, a guy like Gallup, I still like him. He's someone I like coming out. I think he's still good in that offense. He's still likely to be the X in that offense. And listen, if he stays healthy this year, and, I know he's coming off an injury. So again, if his value seems low because he's not flashy like some of these other guys, he's just re-signing and it's boring and he's injured and whatever, then scoop him up, because he could probably be your wide receiver 3 and maybe even better, but probably your wide receiver 3 down the stretch this year. So, I like a player like that. And so again, just trying to be actionable on something that's maybe not flashy and fun. Like, these are the guys that can help you win.
No, and I completely agree. I think in that same vein, the one that I was thinking was maybe the more interesting one for me was Connor with the Cardinals. Yeah. I think there was a lot of Connor slander coming into last season with Edmonds. Is he going to be the guy? We don't know. Well, the team decided he was good enough that they wanted to re-sign him and were willing to let Edmonds leave. I mean, willing to let them leave is a weird term. I don't know that for sure, right? But Edmonds obviously did leave and went to a different team. And now it's pretty much Connor and Benjamin and Jonathan Ward. I mean, like, is Connor the guy there now? Is he a bell cow? He won me a league last year, right? I mean, like, Connor was one of those guys that I think I got him in like the 14th round of a redraft league. You know what I mean? Like one of those like afterthought kind of players to fill my bench, and ended up starting him 8 weeks as the season went along. It just kind of, I don't know, worked out as an RB2 flex option every single week. It was like, yeah, I'll click that box. Let's do it again, And I think if he's going to be the sole proprietor of that backfield, I don't know. I kind of feel like Connor up. I don't want to say don't go buy Connor. We just said it before. It's March. We're not buying running backs, but keep an eye on that. I think that's something that if they don't draft a running back, and the Cardinals are kind of, I don't know, they're kind of in this weird spot right now with Kirk leaving and Hopkins getting older and Green maybe retiring. Who knows if he comes back for another year? And obviously Fitz is already gone, and Max Williams, their tight end, maybe comes. I mean, there's so many question marks on that offense. Do I even want to bother with Connor? But if the price is right, I always say yes, right? That's always what it comes down to. But Jordan, was there any of that? I mean, do you want to talk about the Bills McKissic not signing thing? Is that, did you find that entertaining as a Bills fan, maybe even?
Oh, I found it entertaining. I'll say this: James Conner finished as running back 5 last year.
Yeah,
yeah, and led them and was basically second behind Taylor in touchdowns. Right, when you looked at it, it was actually on a per touch basis as well. He was like top 4, top 5, amongst qualifying players too. So I mean, it was a high efficient producing season. So I think he's got a lot of ways that even if the efficiency comes down, right, maybe he doesn't get the same puck luck in terms of rushing touchdowns. I do think he's got a lot of outs to be, assuming that he's healthy, he'll be a running back 1, right? I mean, that's usually if you get a starting running back who's going to be, the main carrier of touches and he stays healthy, he's going to be a running back 1 in that sphere. That's just kind of the way the math works once the injury rate starts piling up. So I think he's firmly in that conversation as well. I think McKissic's interesting. I wonder if it's interesting from what it might tell about what's to come, right? And, one player I'm thinking about, I'm nostalgic about playing, this is basically my 10th year of Dynasty. One of my first rookie picks was Cordero Patterson. And, I'm going to take a W on that pick because
finally,
we're just going to take a W and that's it. We won. He was successful, right? He hit,
walk off. You're good.
Yeah. Right. But I think from a, hey, if the Bills wanted to sort of, there's three things that they should be doing, right? One is sack Mahomes. The other one is defend Kelsey and Hill. And the third thing is score as many points as you can possibly put up, right? Those are the only three things. And it sounds simple, but everything that they're doing is sort of in line with that. If you just look at that prism, right? Don't screw around, do those things. That's why the rush defense stuff never concerned me last year, right? Because that's not what's going to be of consequence when it matters.
Right.
It's not going to matter if Singletary is going to run because you're going to hand the ball to Allen, right? It doesn't, that you have all those solutions. It doesn't matter. And you're just not going to do that in week 4, right? I think Cordero Patterson would be fascinating as Bill, just because he could do some of the stuff and maybe be that move, a bigger version of the move piece that McKissick is. I don't know what financially that looks like, but I think it'd be fascinating if they were able to sort of replicate some of the stuff that Patterson was doing early on in the year, and they wouldn't need to turn to him as a full time every down back. I think he'd be like a souped up version of McKissick that would be fascinating. I hope for fantasy purposes he goes back to Atlanta because I got a fair amount of shares of him, but I think that would be a fascinating NFL move that would have fantasy implications as well.
Well, and again, I think we got to keep this in mind. We are, a day and a half, maybe if you want to count it, into the season, right? Mm-hmm. Free agency just started Wednesday at 4:00, and here we are Thursday night talking about free agency. We've got a lot to go, right? And I think this is sometimes where, hot takes come out, but they're not really hot takes. It's more of like, well, with this news, this is my initial gut reaction. And I think sometimes people take that to be like, well, you're going to believe that in August? Like, no, that's not what a gut reaction is. Just this is my initial reaction. Like, sometimes there is an initial reaction and then there's a pause. There's some study. There's some thinking. Someone else gets signed. Someone else gets unsigned or traded, or there's always change. Right. And I think sometimes people want to have take lock and be like, well, so you're saying you don't like Rodgers now. Well, you said that back in March, but now he's got all these receivers. Like, yeah, if the information I had at hand, that was my gut reaction. Like, right. I mean, again, I think sometimes the way these trades and signings go, it can be tricky to keep up with it. And as a dynasty owner, or dynasty manager, I should say, it can be even more exhausting. But again, if you're in one, might as well get another one. Let's join a new league. Let's start a new draft, right? Like, you're already doing the research. Have fun with it. I think the one thing I would say to kind of maybe close this up for just a little bit is the more teams you have, the more players you have, and the more fun every signing is, right? The more teams you have, the more places you can go for trades and value different bumps, and send a second in this league and send a third in this league and just see what you get, right? You can kind of test the waters out. And that's the fun part of all of this. I think too, the other way I'll kind of end this segment is that free agency is by far, it's not even close to over. It's by far one of my favorite things. Other than the draft, it's probably my second favorite thing in all of Dynasty, right? Because free agency is where value bumps change the most. And maybe I don't want to say this is a bold take, but I like the offseason more than the regular season. That's why I like Dynasty, is because it not only is it easier because there aren't lineups to set, which I know Scott and I both are not a fan of, but at the same time, it's like I can kind of play the game that I like to play with others that like to play it. And these are not, casual fans in most cases. If you're playing Dynasty, if you're a junkie like the rest of us, this is a year-long hobby. You don't put this to bed. You just keep going. It's March, and we're in free agency, and I care more about free agency than I do the brackets right now. You know what I mean? Like, I just whatever with the March Madness. I have not had time. I've been watching rookie tape. I've been watching replays on things. Like, my Bengals made it to play in February. Like, I did not expect it, right? Like, this has been a crazy, awesome year, and I'm excited for next season. But Dynasty is my favorite, and this is the hot spot of that. So, with that, let's pivot a little bit here, at least into our last segment of the night. We do have a Find Me a Trade this week submitted by a listener, Mark Long, at MarkyMark53. The league is the Marvel Superflex Dynasty, which, again, I love that we get to see so many of these different teams and different leagues and everything. This one is a bonkers league. This one is more intense than most I've seen. I got to give them props. It's a 12-team IDP Superflex PPR, 0.25 PPR tight end premium league. You start 20, 11 of which are defense. So there is a lot of defense in this league. And I'll be honest with you, Mark, none of us on this podcast are IDP stands. Maybe Jordan, maybe you are, but I know Scott and I are not IDP hardcore guys. So I don't think it's out of the realm to say, Mark, you're going to get a lot of offensive trades today. Just that's where we are. That's what we know. And I'd much rather give you a trade I'm confident in than just make something up that's not good. That's not helping anybody. So we'll get into the roster for a little bit here, but it is a super flex. So there is you start 9 offense and 11 defense. It's 40 bench, 10 IR, and 5 taxis. So there is a lot on this roster. And again, I think to keep it simpler, I'm probably just going to read the offense because I just feel like maybe that's a better way for me to play it. Hang on one second. Let me pull this roster up. Or did you already have it up, Scott? I didn't think you did. But...
I do.
Okay. But do you want to pull it up then and share and I'll kind of read off real quick? That'd be great.
Okay.
So this is
Okay. So here, I'm going to read the roster and then you can read what he says.
Perfect.
Okay. So his quarterback group is Russell Wilson, Trevor Lawrence, Jared Goff, Gardner Minshew. Running backs, DeAndre Swift, J.K. Dobbins. Really no one else of note. J.D. McKissick, I guess. Justin Jackson. Wide receiver, Jamar Chase, CeeDee Lamb, Elijah Moore, Cortland Sutton, Rashad Bateman. That's pretty much it there. And then tight end, Jonnu Smith and Austin Hooper.
Whew.
Yeah.
Mercy.
And now there's a lot of defense. So there's 56 total players, and I think there's like 18 on offense there. So
yeah,
I don't know. So here's the thing, Mark. I don't do IDP. So I don't know if this is like normal or not. I have no idea. Like, I don't know why you have like 38 defensive ends and you have 2 tight ends, because this is tight end premium. So like, I don't know if maybe the scoring is skewed that way. I tried to look at your scoring to see like, are sacks worth like 26 points? I don't know. So I guess that's where, I had a little bit of trouble finding your trade. I can improve your offensive players. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how much that affects your overall strategy with IDP. I don't know what else that affects now. Andrew, you want to read what he says, and then we can we'll kind of circle back on all those points.
Yeah. So Mark is he's again, this is a league that is a little outside of our normal realm, but we did want to get it in here because I think there's some value to be talked about. But he says, as of right now, I'm interested in trying to upgrade running back and linebacker. He just traded his 23 first and second for Russell Wilson. He's also got the 102, 103, 112, 207 in this year's draft to move if we need to also. So I'm looking at that, like, this team is pretty good. I don't think there's any massive holes, maybe tight end, which is always going to be a hole in this league. But a 0.25 tight end premium, I'm not really that worried about it. It helps, but you're not getting enough of a boost to make that a big detriment, in my opinion.
Well,
not saying that's true, but
your best tight end can't be tight end 74.
True. And again, Hooper, it's Hooper or Smith. You're going to have to fix that. You're going to have to address that. I agree. I'm just saying, like, I'm not as worried with a bad tight end in this kind of a format. With all the other points being scored, especially in an IDP league, when you start 20 players, if your tight end scores 10 points versus 20, it doesn't matter as much. And we've talked about this a little bit. Like, when you're only starting 8 versus 12, those points matter a lot more if you're only starting 8 players, right? If you need to consolidate that and get your roster as tight as you can get. But if you're starting 20 players, you can kind of get lost in the crowd. And yes, it'd be nice to have a good tight end, but if you're strong at linebacker and running back and safety and everything other position, like, again, I'm not well enough versed at IDP to know if that's true here, but I'm just looking at it like, in general, tight end is the weak spot, but I don't know if it's something I would panic about. I guess that's where I'm going with it. But he does have a lot of draft picks, and having some draft capital in a league like this, obviously, if you're starting IDP, that opens up one first round is going to be crazy awesome value. You're going to have a ton of players with, Hutchinson and other guys like that. There's some great DBs coming into the league. There's going to be a lot of value in that first and second round. So I like that he's got some good picks there. But I guess, Jordan, maybe let's start with you. What was your thought on this team, and kind of where would you make your first move?
Yeah, so I would do the Russell Wilson trade again. That would be the solution to this problem. Whatever that is, whatever that pick value is, just make the same deal and you'll be at the right spot.
Yeah. Agreed.
I think generally speaking, my strategy would be to you fix running back by volume. right? More so than you do picking individual running backs, right? So that's, a lot of backup running backs, right? We've talked about guys like Fournette and Connor, right? Those guys at sort of cheaper costs you can do. I would see two things. And one thing that jumped out at me was Lawrence. There's a lot of different takes. In a world where you can get Russell Wilson for a first and something that wasn't a first, it was a first and a second, a first and a third. There seems to be a lot of difference in valuations here in terms of quarterbacks. I would shop Lawrence, and I would think about different ways to do it. I think a Lawrence for Stafford spread could be pretty big depending on where you are, and what league you are, what owners or what GMs you're talking with, right? I think that could be a big spread. Just as a ballpark for this particular purpose, Lawrence for Stafford and Alvin Kamara as a framework, what sort of needs to go from there? That makes you better right now in terms of both at quarterback and at running back. And I think that, there's a value difference probably between Lawrence and Stafford, depending on what leagues you're looking at. Again, you're probably going to need to add to the Lawrence side, but that would be sort of a starting framework that I would think about, because you're taking the cash out value on Lawrence right now instead of holding it on your roster and it being a sub producer, right? Which is very much
hoping it pays off in 3 years or whatever. Yep.
Correct. Because you know what? By that time, I think Stafford is going to build multiple wins of a lead, and then Lawrence is chasing him, right? And that stuff down the line, any edge that he gets, right, that's very speculative and stuff that you could use now. So that would be one thing that I would think about doing, that as a centric trade. Again, I don't think that works straight up, but that's probably the rubric of a trade that I would think would be pretty interesting. There might be other examples of that you could potentially do, but that was the first one that I saw. The other one that I would think about doing, you have 102, you have 103, might be running backs there. You might just be able to sit. The other thing I would think about doing is, again, very much all over the place in terms of valuations. I was looking up in our trade finder earlier, some McCaffrey deals, and I mean, all over the place, right? I mean, and so taking, Matt Ryan and Christian McCaffrey for Justin Fields, right? And then McCaffrey for 2 firsts is another deal, right? So they're all over the place. McCaffrey for Aaron Jones, Trey Sermon, and Hawkinson, right? Kind of all over the place. I would look at the person that has them. I don't know enough about IDP to say whether or not they're a contender, but there's some spots on the offense that I could say, hey, listen, like they might be looking to retool. And if you want to take on, if they want to take on some of the rookie future risk, and you want to take on some of the immediate risk of some of the banged up McCaffrey stuff, but take a big swing, doing it centric around that 103 would be an interesting one. They might want 102. If you don't see a big difference there between, Hall or Spiller, or maybe taking one of the quarterbacks at 3, like if you look at that as a group, maybe that does it straight up. I don't know. But that would be something that I would think about doing, because I think there's no one that has the difference making potential that McCaffrey does. He's a singular player in terms of guys that can reshape the orbit of which your team revolves around. That's not a quarterback. And I think taking a swing like that, for what's probably going to be a second round running back or a first round wide receiver, or a quarterback, and their odds are like 60%, any of those assets kind of at best, taking a shot on a player is good, that you're just hoping that he's healthy. I think that's one that can be a really elite shot.
No, I like that. And that definitely does kind of the same sort of move I usually do, where it's, I want to consolidate power, right? Like I want to do what I can to kind of make my roster as premium as possible. So I think that's a fine idea. I think that's exactly where I would want to go, is somewhere in that vein of like getting a CMC or getting a Kamara, getting a Stafford. Those are the kind of players that, might be a little bit depressed and you can get for a little bit better, than you think you can, and don't have to pay as much as you want, that kind of a thing. I think that's perfect. And mine was in a similar vein, and kind of, that's why I'll piggyback on mine next here, was that I was going to say you can, Howard the Duck, which again, I love that Howard the Duck is in this Marvel-centric league because it's a deep cut. I know, Scott, you're not a fan because you're not familiar, but anyone
don't know who he is.
I know anyone who's a huge fan of MCU and will understand the Howard the Duck, which I think that's a terrific team name anyway. But my trade was to send Swift, Goff, and maybe the 212 to Howard the Duck for Jonathan Taylor and Gabe Davis. Now, I'm not sure this trade goes through as is.
No
And we
chance.
always say this. I know we always say this. Like, there are definitely people out there that value Swift a lot lower than most, but he is the running back 2 in DLF March ADP, right? He is literally all the way up to RB2 or 3 or whatever. Like, he's right there. So for some people, Taylor not having a quarterback, losing Wentz, who knows where they're going to be. I could see there being a manager out there who has Taylor and Gabe Davis, and this Howard the Duck, he only has Murray, Wentz, Locke, and Heineke. So you got Wentz and Heineke on the same team now in Washington. Who one of them will win the job, I guess. But are you excited? No. Locke in Seattle, who knows if he keeps that job? He's got it kind of for now. Murray obviously is a stud, but in Superflex, I'd want a better second quarterback than any of those. And I'm not saying Goff is a terrific second quarterback, but he gives you some options. At least he's going to start. And also you get that kind of stack. Some people like a stack. So Swift and Goff is a stack, which some people, again, depending on who you're trading with. And then adding in the 212 in this IDP league, the 212 is like a 112, right? The 212 is like a first round pick because you've got offense and defense in this rookie draft. So I'm looking at it like some people, and again, I don't know enough about IDP to know if that's the true value, but that's how I'm looking at it in my eyes. And then to get Taylor and Gabe Davis, I think some of the hype on Gabe Davis has come down a little bit. I do think he's still going to be a wide receiver 2-3 option. I think they just re-signed Isaiah McKenzie, if I recall, but Cole Beasley's walking, and you're the Bills fan, Jordan. You'll know more than me. But the logic is Gabe Davis was huge in the playoffs, and everybody was all about him. And I think that's kind of come back down to reality. So I don't know. I feel like this is a trade that I would start with, maybe send it, see what kind of response you get. I wouldn't be afraid to add a little more to it or, swap out Goff for another asset. But my thought process here is very similar to yours, Jordan. Let's go get a stud running back. Let's go put somebody. And again, Swift might be that guy for you, but I still value Taylor more, right? I really would rather have somebody like a Taylor over Swift. And if you can do it where you get CMC and Swift in your trade, I like that. But that's kind of where my head went with that. And I guess, Scott, what are your thoughts on that? And then go into yours if you want.
Yeah, I mean, if you can get Taylor for, anything less than giving up your entire team and all your future assets, then I guess, yeah.
I'm higher on Goff than most. I'll say that too. I'll be honest. Like, Goff is still a starting quarterback, and you're sending one without getting one back. There are definitely trades like this that happen. I've seen it.
But does Goff do anything for you?
Yeah.
Does he though?
I like Goff more than Wentz. I like him more than Locke and Heineke. He'd be my quarterback too on that team. Easy. They just got Chark. They're going to be getting someone else. I think that offense is going to be taken off this year. That's just my gut.
I mean,
you can disagree with that, obviously.
These are the skin in this league is incredible because of the theme. So I can't quickly go to the settings, but right. I would really like to pull up and tell you that Goff was like QB 28. So something like that. But okay, that's fair. No, I mean, it's a quarterback. I get it. All right, here's the thing. For me, again, I'm not an IDP guy. I'm in a league that we don't have defense. We don't have kicker. It's like 5 or 6 IDP spots. There's like D-line, linebacker, DB. So it's a little more condensed. And then a couple flex. So it's similar to this, but it's about half the starters, and it's more of a flex, a condensed version. And so what I did in that league, I'm still in that league. So what I do in that league is I kind of split it up. I have my offense and I have my defense. And so I look at them in completely different ways. I just have an offensive player strategy, and then I have a IDP strategy. And since I really knew nothing about IDP or how to draft them in the startup, I pretty much just focused on offense and my offensive side, because there's twice as many starters. I decided to focus there, and it's incredibly strong, like very, very strong. I was first in the league for most of the year until injuries finally did me in at the end. But I essentially decided this would be my kind of learning on this. And I really didn't even draft any defensive players. I've just used the waiver for them. And obviously in a league like that, where I think we maybe roster like 8 to 10 times 12, is maybe 100 to 120 players. Obviously your league, Mark, rosters a lot more players. So that's not a viable strategy here. But what I found is I could be very competitive with that. So what I kind of did is I just did the same thing with your league, and I took your roster and I split it up. And I said, okay, here on offense, what would my strategy be? If I didn't have any IDPs and I'm just looking at your offense and I'm going, this is a really shallow starting line. It's what, start
9 offense. Yep.
So I want 2 stud super flex, or 2 stud quarterbacks, so I can use that super flex to my advantage. You need to upgrade tight end too. So it's kind of hard. I'm trying to find a lot of different spots here. You did note that you wanted to help your running backs and linebackers. There was a specific roster, which I believe was Rocket. He has a ton of these young linebackers that are still really young and have not necessarily made that leap to the next level. So I'm wondering if he's pretty weak at wide receiver too. At wide receiver in general, his wide receiver room is not great. So I went for moving Bateman and potentially one of those picks, probably a second, that 207 that I believe you have, for Connor and Mosley. If you want kind of that veteran, he may not give up Mosley. I don't know how linebackers are valued. All I know is I picked up Mosley off waivers last year and he was an absolute beast for me. Looking at your scoring settings, he was, again, one of the top linebackers, but he's getting old. So I don't know, with all those young linebackers, would he be willing to move on from one of the older guys? Or on the other hand, if he's not feeling one of these young guys that he took, I'd be willing to take the gamble on Davis, Simmons, Queen, any of those guys. They're still like 22, 23 years old, very young. They're in defenses where they get to make plays, play all over the field, get those tackles. I equate linebackers to like the running backs, right? Those are the guys that are getting the volume. They're getting the touches, essentially, right? The touches being tackles. They're out there. Every play they can make an impact, and they're going to give you that core scoring for the defensive side. So getting one of those young guys, Bateman, is going to depend how this guy feels about Bateman, because really his value hasn't changed much from last year to this year. But also, if he wasn't high on him to begin with, then he's probably still not high on him. So therefore, this trade probably doesn't happen. But just wanted to kind of throw out my philosophy on that, and almost maybe, look at it as 2 different leagues, look at it as 2 different rosters, and just focus on your offense and then focus on your defense. And then when you're trying to get pieces thrown in on trades, instead of asking for like a third, ask for, a linebacker, some random young linebacker that could be something. Because again, with those 3rd round picks, those are dart throws as well, right? So those lottery tickets, whether they hit or not, hey, whatever, you might as well take your shot on one of the young linebackers.
Love it. I think at least you got some linebacker talk in there for him. That was helpful of you, Scott. I appreciate that. I know, again, linebackers and IDP in general, I was in one IDP league last year, and just not my cup of tea, man. I respect all of the people that grind and hustle on that. It's not my thing. There's too many ways to score, too many players to worry about, and names that I'm not familiar with as much. So no, I think that those are both pretty good options. And I think in general, Mark, what we're kind of saying is your team's pretty good. I don't think there's any, again, none of us talked about tight end as a target here. And I think something to be said for that, and kind of piggyback back into the strategy talk. You don't have to make any trades right now. Right? None of these trades need to happen today. I think you're in a good spot. With the draft capital you've got, there's no reason to make a move unless you're getting a steal. And that's part of why the trade I made would be a steal, right? To get Taylor and Davis for that would be a good trade. And that would be worth doing. I'm not going to say it's likely, but I think there is some possibility that someone in your league is willing to give up more than they may expect. So hopefully that helps. Hopefully you got some ideas. And if obviously everyone except Mark who's listening, hopefully you can take away some things from that too, and just say, all right, well, how can I make my team better? Maybe I've got a guy like Dobbins or Bateman or somebody, and maybe there's some moves I can make, to get Swift and move and pivot up to Taylor, or, trade a rookie pick for CMC straight up. Because honestly, CMC is one of those guys too. Like, you can do 103, like you were saying, Jordan, 103 and something else for CMC. 2 years ago, that'd be crazy, right? Like 2 years ago, people were like, no way is one rookie, one first round pick enough. That's enough now. right? I think that's probably right where it is, even in a down class. And I think Kane hit on this perfectly last week. This isn't really that bad of a class. It just doesn't have the flash and pizzazz at the top that we're used to. There's no Trevor Lawrence. There's no Joe Burrow. There's no Tua Tagovailoa. Like, there's nobody that's like standing out above and beyond. Even the running back group is pretty. It's deep, but it's not top heavy at all. You've got 2 guys, maybe 3, I guess, if you count Walker, but like 3 guys at the top that are first round picks. And then after that, it's who knows what. We're going to learn a lot at the draft. So I think, too, this is the kind of year where trading rookie picks for stud players may not be a bad idea, but you don't have to do it today, right, to kind of keep badgering on that topic. But here we are at 1 hour and 45 in, so we're going to wrap it up. I guess first things first, Jordan, really appreciate you having us talk to you today and kind of get us some ideas. But where can people find you, and kind of reiterate again where people can find your work?
Yeah, analyticsofdynasty.com. You can find the book, The Rebuilding Guide. I've got a bundle between the Rebuilding Guide and the book, so you can go ahead and get both of them. And I think it's fun because some of the topical stuff, like AOD, each year takes on a little bit of a different field depending on just what I'm thinking about in the process of writing it. But the Rebuilding Guide is like its own individual standalone thing that I think is fun. And I'll probably add, I don't know what I'm going to do with it in the future, whether I add to it, whether I make it, just update it or sort of what I'm going to do with it. But I think it'll be useful for even if you're not thinking about rebuilding. I think it's a useful strategy thing just in terms of team building. So yeah, you can get them both and come over and be a subscriber. I mean, when we're done here, I'm going to record a podcast. I release one every day in the off season, and
that's quite a grind.
388 last year was how many I did. So so it's something every day to talk about, and 8 a.m. every morning on the East Coast, you get it on your podcast feed of choice. So we always got you taken care of there in our trade database, our real draft position finder, all our fun stuff. You can come check us out and subscribe over there and join our chat. Join our chat, and we'll constantly be talking. I got to go catch up with all of them now. We've been reacting all night.
I'm sure.
We've been talking, so lots to catch up with. So,
we really appreciate it. We love the way you look at Dynasty, and I think it lines up perfectly with a lot of how we do too. I mean, there is no wrong way to play this game, but there are a lot of fun ways. And I think looking at it from numbers and putting numbers to things that, taking feelings and make them actionable and all that, that's right in our wheelhouse. So we really appreciate you coming on and sharing some of your knowledge tonight. It's been great. Obviously for the rest of us here. So let's kind of get through some of this. Obviously follow us on Twitter at Dynasty Junkies. You can follow the DAP Network at DAP_network. We go live every Thursday night, but I know Fantasy Timeline goes live on Wednesdays. Sometimes Russ messes up and goes live on Tuesdays with Trade Addicts. You can find all of us there. Obviously Casey's Get Real podcast is on that network as well. We're all big fans of each other and love boosting each other up. So subscribe to all of us, subscribe to each one of us if you can. Follow us on Twitter. I always say to people too, send us DMs if you want to be in Find Me a Trade. There's a thing in the link tree on our Twitter where you can actually submit your team to be on Find Me a Trade. We're going to have I think it's next week, right, Scott? We're doing Find Me a Trade Spectacular, where we're going to take some leagues, and the 3 of us, Rocky's going to be on. The 3 of us are going to be doing just trades all over the place, talking about free agency, talking about different ways to kind of get some trades done. Should be a good show. But definitely subscribe, rate, and review on all the major podcast platforms as well. We love the feedback. Anything you can give us there. I'm at Andrew Hall FF, Scott at Scott_Sidlow. Our other host, who's not here, so everything's his fault, is Rocky at Dynasty FF Addict. Follow us all, send us DMs. We love talking Dynasty. We're all junkies in this together. So there's never a bad question. I love giving advice. You know what I mean? Like, even if it's bad advice, I don't mind. But we're all here to help each other and get better at this game. So with that, I'll let you finish us up here, Scott, and take us out.
Shout out to the homies in the chat as always. There was a question on there from Jerry Bagshaw. Would you pay a second-round rookie pick for Amari Rodgers now that Adams is gone? That is a hell no for me. There's about 35 wide receivers in this rookie class that I like better than Amari Rodgers, so I'll just take my shot with them.
Third or fourth, maybe. Yeah, but not a second.
Hey, no. Sure. Right. Throw out a third, see what happens. Also, thanks to our buddy Mark Long for submitting your Find Me a Trade. Huge thanks to Jordan. It's been, I've read a lot of your stuff over the years. Listened to you. Amazing stuff, man. You've really helped me become a better player significantly. So I appreciate your time, appreciate you giving us 2 hours tonight. Thanks so much, man. And so for Jordan, for Andrew, for Rocky, and myself, Junkies out.